What is up, y'all, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Pierce AC, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to tune your drift cars in Forza Horizon 5. Similar to my general tuning video, I did a lot of research on techniques and tips used in real life, and all the articles I used will be down below. In Forza, there's a lot of different types of drift setups you can aim for. Maybe you're doing a pretty basic drift build, building a car for point drifting, or maybe you just like a certain car and want to push that chassis. For today, I'm going to be aiming for somewhere in the middle by just building a fun, well-balanced drift car. I feel this is a good middle ground to start at, and it'll be the easiest way to show you guys the basic fundamentals used when tuning for drifting. When picking a car for drifting, it's really going to come down to preference. Due to the swappable drivetrains, almost anything can be drifted with a couple exceptions, and as you spend more time drifting and tuning, you'll be able to find a car that suits your drive style the most. Today, we're going to be working with the A90 Supra, one of my favorite cars to drift in this game, and with the dialed setup, it can be one of the most solid drift cars in Horizon. Now that you have a car selected, the first thing you're going to do is come to the upgrade section right here. Then go to the conversion tab, and here you'll be deciding what kind of car you'll be building. Maybe you just want to keep it tame and leave the stock motor, or maybe you want to push it a little more and throw one of the crazier engines in. For the drivetrain, I almost always go with rear wheel drive. However, there are some cases where all wheel drive can be better, specifically when you're doing point drifting. However, for this build, I'm just aiming for an all-around drift car, so I'll leave this rear wheel drive. Aspiration is really just going to help you get more power out of your engine. When I'm building for drifting, I like to put the body kit on because one, a lot of the time it makes the car look a little better, which I care about a little more when I'm drifting, and second, it can actually allow you to get more grip, which can help a lot, especially in the higher powered cars. But if you don't have the option, it's really not going to affect you too much. Then in aero, you're really not going to need downforce for drifting, so this section is really mostly cosmetic. Then in tires, your choices here are really going to depend on the type of drifting you'll be doing. But for a higher power car like this Supra here, I'll usually just go with the drifting compound, and then I usually max out the tire tread because grip can actually help your drift car a lot. Now I know it sounds counterintuitive, but as Abraham Lincoln once said, drifting is the controlled loss of traction. In some cases, different compounds like drag or snow can actually help you slide for longer, but for a normal drift car, the drift compound will do just fine. The rest of this section, in my opinion, is largely cosmetic, so go with whatever you think fits the car. Coming to the next section, you're gonna max everything out until the transmission. Typically for drifting, the less amount of gears the better, so if it's a stock 6-speed, you can just leave it, but sometimes a car may be a 7 or 8-speed, and in that case, you can just switch it down to 6 gears. Then for your diff, you might as well go with the drift diff, but all the options are only going to affect the preset the diff is on. Then in platform and handling, you're going to want to fully upgrade everything. Go with the drift suspension and then come to weight reduction. You may have to test this a little, but I usually stay with either sport weight reduction or race. Sometimes race reduction can make the car a bit too twitchy in transition, so it can be a good idea to start from sport and work from there. Then in the engine, it's really going to come down to preference. But if you're going for the highest horsepower, then obviously you'd fully upgrade everything here. However, if you're aiming for a certain power number, then this is where you would reach that. Before you leave this section, go ahead and press Y and take note of your weight distribution. That number will be the front, and to find the rear, you just take 100 and subtract your front from that. Now that you're done with your upgrades, the first thing you're going to want to do is head into custom tuning. Here is where you'll be setting your base tune, and later we'll also be coming back to get the car dialed. But for now, we're just going to make a couple changes. First, we're going to drop the rear tire pressure around 10 to 15 psi, and we'll leave the front where it is for now, and we'll change later depending on how the front grips while drifting. Now gearing is very important for drifting. To start, I actually use the same gear ratios that are used in NASCAR, as a lot of pro drifters use these too. For the final drive, it will be 4.22, and starting with the first gear, it'll be at 1.8, then second at 1.45, third I'll put at 1.16, and finally fourth I'll put at 1. NASCAR transmissions only have 4 speeds, but sometimes on higher power cars, I will bring 5th to be just above 4th, so I have a little more room, and then change 6th to be just below 5th, so it's at least usable. I may be coming back here depending on how the car feels on the road. Alignment is also going to be very important. If you guys would like more in-depth explanations on any of the alignment section, as well as anything else in the custom tuning menu, check out my general guide to tuning in Horizon. I have a lot more extensive explanations of all the options. Now back in alignment, I like to leave the front where it is maxed out, and I'll change the rear to be just below 0. For toe, I'll put somewhere between -0.5 and -0.8 toe out in the front, and then slight toe in on the rear to help with acceleration. I'll also leave the caster on max as it helps the car center itself when exiting or transitioning while drifting. Roll bars in drifting can be a controversial topic. Due to most drift cars being based on normal road cars, the front roll bars are often too stiff, so a lot of people will remove their front roll bar, but in a perfect world, a purpose-built drift car will actually still have a front roll bar. However, it would just be very thin and fairly soft. So I start with my front stiffness very low, or sometimes the minimum will go depending on the car. Now the rear is also up to debate too, but in a lot of higher power cars, the same idea from the front applies. So I will start with the rear slightly stiffer than the front. For springs, I'm going to recommend starting with the same formula from Hoki Hoshi that I gave you guys in my tuning video. However, that is just a starting point, and drift cars tend to like softer suspension setups as that translates to more traction. However, too soft make input somewhat sluggish. So with that in mind, I will take my highest setting minus my lowest times my weight distribution in the front, which we found earlier, and then add back the lowest setting. Then I will do the same thing in the rear. From here, I'll usually soften the rear just a bit. However, I'll usually revisit this tab after drifting a bit. Always drop ride height to the lowest. The only time I would add ride height is if your car is scraping the ground or bottoming out. For rebound, I'll use the same formula and revisit later. Then for bump, I'll start with 55 to 60% of my rebound for drifting. If you have aero, it's a good idea to move it all the way towards speed, as downforce will most likely just hurt you while drifting. For brakes, you should start with a front bias maybe around 65% to the front, as you can use braking to control your drifts without reducing rear wheel speed. In real life, this is usually referred to as left foot braking. Then for the diff, for acceleration, it's good to start somewhere between 90 to 100%. I usually go close to full lock, and then for deceleration, it really is going to come down to personal preference. I've seen a lot of people recommend high deceleration lock rates, but for me and my driving style, I found the car feels more predictable when I leave the deceleration very low or 0%. So experiment with this a bit and see what fits your driving style more. Next, the most important step when tuning your car: designing it. Of course, this step isn't necessary, but once you're happy with your car, you're ready to go take it on a drive. Sometimes you're gonna take your car out and it'll be almost perfect, and sometimes you just won't know what is wrong. And because of this, I wrote up a list of some changes you can make to help your car. Now this list is a lot shorter than last time due to the fact that drifting is essentially just getting the car to oversteer, but in a controllable way. Now feel free to pause the video, and this list will also be down in the description if you guys want to save it, along with the articles I mentioned earlier that can actually help a lot. For the Supra, I don't like how the car is gripping in the front, so I'm going to drop the tire pressure by a couple PSI, and then I can't seem to get enough angle, and I think that is due to me hitting redline too fast. So first, I'm going to try to move my final drive towards speed, as it makes enough power to make up for it. I also don't think the rear end is receiving the power well, so I'm going to move to slight positive camber in the rear as well as soften the rear spring. I also want to be able to left foot brake a little more, so I'm going to increase the front braking bias slightly. And finally, I want to be able to hold the angle a little more, so I'm going to make the rear roll bar stiffer to increase the bias towards oversteer. As you spend more time tuning and messing with your cars, the different options and changes you make will start to make more sense to you. Similar to what I said in my last tuning video, tuning is not a linear process, and as you do it more, you'll likely develop your own processes and tests that may even be better than mine. And that is the point of this video. I'm just trying to get you guys the foundation, and your tuning will grow from there. With all that said, the rest is up to you. If you guys want to see a tutorial on how to drift in Forza, feel free to let me know in the comments or just hit me with any questions you guys have. I'll be happy to help you guys out, and good luck with your tunes. But most importantly, be smooth, y'all. Peace.